Hello there, listeners. Welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I'm your host, Casey Fatchett. If you haven't listened to the podcast before, in addition to bringing you informative and entertaining photography and business-related content, I also go on adventures with the crew of the Starship Fibonacci. Right now, I'm going over security protocols with our sentient spaceship, Fib.
Don't call me Fib.
Sure thing, Phoebo. But before we get started, I would like to read a review we recently received on Apple Podcasts. Absolute Brilliance says, "Love this podcast. It covers a really broad range of topics that relate to photography, everything from business and marketing to promoting diversity in the industry. Bonus points for the animated episodes, yay, which are a lot of fun and have tons of Easter egg-like references that go straight to my geeky heart." Oh, that's so nice. And reviews like that really help out the podcast. You see, The Nerdy Photographer is an independent podcast. That means I don't have a podcast network behind the scenes promoting the show, nor do I have a team of producers working on every episode. When you share this podcast with your friends or leave a review, you are helping others discover this podcast in ways that I am unable to do by myself. So I really appreciate you making the effort to help out.
That is very nice and important. But this is also important. If you ever need to override my security system, the voice recognition system requires a match with the control words, which are Klaatu, Barada.
Nikto?
No, Noodle.
Well, it was definitely an N-word. Hold on, I need to intro the episode. In this episode, I speak with photographer Rob Hall about photography myths and tropes. You might know Rob from his awesome YouTube videos or his Instagram. We had so much to talk about. There are so many photography industry and just photography myths and things out there. Like, so much we had to break it into 2 episodes, and they're long episodes. And we'll get into all of that after this short break.
The words back to me.
How hard is it to remember 3 words?
Yeah, so I'm not sure how we handle the situation.
Did you have a contract?
Well, I had one I found for free online, but my lawyer says it might not hold up.
Next time, you should head over to nerdyphotographer.com. They've got a selection of contract templates for weddings, events, portrait sessions, and even for hiring second photographers and associate photographers, which would certainly have helped you in your current situation.
Really? I will check that out. Nerdyphotographer.com?
Yep, nerdyphotographer.com. They've got all sorts of contracts and agreements that can help make sure to protect you and your clients. So what are you going to do?
Well, we just have to wait and see what happens, I guess.
So, no pants on?
Who know anything below the waist? Totally Porky Pig in it.
Impressive.
Not really. It was pretty cold out.
Ew.
Yep.
Hello, and welcome to the Nerdy Photographer Podcast. I am here on this episode with editorial photographer Rob Hall. Welcome, Rob.
Hello, Casey. Thank you for having me.
And this episode kind of comes out of something you were doing on Instagram that I jumped on about photography industry myths and tropes. So we're going to get into this, and we're going to discuss some very prevalent myths and tropes. So the first one we're going to get into here is that you must have expensive gear to take high-quality pictures.
Is this going to be a whole episode just on number 1? I feel like it could be.
I think we could go on this for probably 3 or 4 days just on question number 1.
This is definitely like the biggest photography trope. One of the things that I joked about when this was a conversation, I would say about half of the responses were one side of this or the other. And it goes back and forth, and you see articles that support like both sides of it quarterly from every single photography blog. It's every YouTuber has a video on it, one side or the other, and it all or both, yeah. And it always kind of amounts to the same thing, which is like, oh, it kind of helps, but it doesn't make you a better photographer. And like that's the only place that we've gotten with that argument, which has been discussed since I've been in photography, which was over a decade, and probably much longer than that.
Oh yeah, I mean, I can remember. I mean, I've been at this for 20 years, and it was definitely back shooting film. It was still an issue. Like expensive gear doesn't make you a better photographer. Having the right gear for the job that you're trying to do can help you take a better photo. And it's like you said, there's an article, every few months, you have to have the brand new, most expensive, most amazing gear, or, gear doesn't matter. Every 3 months, it's one or the other. And for most people, the best camera that you have is the camera that's on you. And for most people, that is their phone. But you're not going to do 99% of any sort of professional photography jobs with your phone, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and the big argument there that if you it doesn't make you a better photographer, I've seen instances where that is complete BS. And I think the biggest one that I think back to is I remember trying to teach my wife photography on a DSLR, and that whole delay between changing settings and then seeing the photograph either later, all the while hearing oh, you don't have to be looking every time once you understand it, so she would just kind of plug away and just not really be dialed into the meter, and all of her photos would be off to some degree. Man, when I put a mirrorless in her hand, with a DSLR, we never got anywhere. We would try it. She would kind of pick up on maybe one facet of manual photography, right? She'd understand shutter speed, and then 2 weeks later we'd try and that would be gone again. We brought a mirrorless camera the first time. She instantly understood the relationship of all three. She knew what all three did by the end of it. She could interweave them. All of her photos were appropriate brightness. That instant feedback of just seeing everything live completely made her a better photographer.
And that's the thing. It's it depends on the person. It completely depends on who you are and what you respond to. And that gets into, every other aspect of gear talk and what's better for this, whatever. It's what works for you. The fact that she's able to completely understand the exposure triangle just because she is getting that instantaneous feedback is great. And that's
yeah.
It doesn't matter what kind of camera it is, what brand of camera it is, or how expensive the camera is. It's that you are becoming more knowledgeable and understanding of how everything fits together, based on that equipment.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think this will probably be a recurring theme throughout the episode, is that the answer to most tropes, photography tropes in general, and most questions about photography, the answer is usually it depends. That is the most accurate answer you can give, and unfortunately the answer that nobody wants.
Right, because they don't want to actually sit down and take the time to figure it out for themselves. And that's a whole other industry issue that, bugs me lately, is just people saying just tell me the answer. Just give me the answer right now. Tell me what the best camera is, and then I'm going to go out and buy the best camera, and that means I'm going to take the best pictures. No, it depends. You're exactly right.
Yep.
It depends.
Yeah, but I mean, I think if I were to sum it up, do you have to have expensive gear? Does gear matter at all? Yeah, it absolutely impacts you. It can be the difference between you getting some jobs. There's still the people going around in the wedding world, and they're asking the question because they read it on the knot. Do you have a full frame camera? Do you have a full frame DSLR? Which is actually kind of funny considering, how much of the industry has moved to mirrorless, that some portion of the industry would be like, no, I don't have a full frame DSLR.
Well, they would probably say well, that depends on what you mean by full frame. And do you understand what a mirrorless camera is? Let's get into the technicalities of, camera gear. And that's something that, in the wedding industry, people would be you knew it immediately, that they had gotten this list off the knot or wherever. And we're saying asking the questions. And I'd be so how much do you know about cameras? Yeah. That was, and 95% of the time they had no idea anything about cameras, and they were just this is just a question that we were told to ask. And part of getting the job for me was then saying let's talk about cameras. I will, and I'm not going to bore you with camera details, but I'm just going to give you a little bit of an education so that when you do talk to other photographers, what answers you should be getting, and that helped distinguish me from other people. Saying listen, it's not just about the camera; it's about other things that are involved. And I agree. It's not just having expensive gear. Yes, gear can help you with certain jobs. So if you're an architectural photographer, yeah, you probably might want a tilt shift lens, but they're seriously expensive. But like, there are other things like, do you absolutely, as a wedding photographer, need to have a macro lens to shoot ring shots? No, you don't. Like, yeah, it can help, but you don't absolutely need it. It's, you find ways around things also. Like, sometimes you don't have the gear. One of the things that I do a lot of the time is like, I don't necessarily want to spend $500 on something or $1,000 on a piece of equipment. I'll build something. I'll be a little bit more creative. Sometimes creativity really is the mother of invention.
Yeah, I mean, that is the book Play Anything by Ian Bogost. He talks about how all aspects of playing are derived from putting limitations on things, right? So that's definitely true in photography. Like, as soon as you're limited, as soon as you don't have everything, you have to find solutions or just find an alternative and exercise that to the best of its ability. And I think that's a huge point in being a photographer. And honestly, like, from somebody who has way more options than they need, that can be exhausting. Like, when you have everything, it can be a deterrent for quality.
Yeah, it can also, like, it just make it feel stifling almost. Like, you can feel like sort of that there's too many options to choose from. And, like, I've taught workshops and stuff where I say to people, like, listen, let's go back to, my film photography days. You have 24 or 36 exposures to make this happen. Like, let's just like limit it. So you have to think about it. And like, you really have to think about every shot that you're taking. You're not just like throwing a whole bunch of, exposures out there. You've only got like X amount of exposures to, reach the goal that you're looking for.
I really think this could be a whole episode, but I mean, the summary is, I think we've stated it. And the reason that all of these articles always get to the same place is that, it depends. It can help and make you a better photographer, but there are benefits to exploring other options and being limited.
Right. Exactly. All right. Moving on to the next one. The next photography myth or trope, and I think this actually applies to a lot of different industries or job pursuits. You have to struggle to be a success, or if you're not struggling, you're doing something wrong.
It's so gross. I absolutely hate this trope. It's especially prevalent in creative ones, although I feel like people have found it a way. If you look at social media today, it seems like almost everybody has a side hustle, right? That's just like part of society, is to have whatever you're working on and then that other thing that you're working on in the meantime. And I don't know. Hopefully there are still some people out there just enjoying, like, they have their 40-hour work week and that's all they do, because I'm not seeing them.
Or they just have a hobby. They just have a hobby.
Yeah,
this is,
right.
This is actually was it's one of the other topics we put. Like, you don't have to do this because you enjoy this doesn't mean you have to do it for a living. You don't have to charge money for it. And I think that, we have often, like, I mean, I for many years thought, I've got to be like, I got to stay up until 2:00 in the morning editing. I got to stay up until like 4:00 editing this job to get it out because, it's like, I got to hustle. I always got to be hustling. But then it was just sort of like, my wife was like, you need to relax. You need to like really impose some work-life balance in there. And that doesn't mean that sometimes you don't work late or you don't, stretch it out a little bit, but you don't always have to be operating at 125% capacity.
Yeah, I think that's one of the issues with this current culture, where we have, we're loosely talking about this, like 5 different social media platforms that you're doing. And maybe if you've got a regular creative position that you're representing and a side hustle, and now you've got like separate entities for both, and everything in photography tells you that it has to be, whatever business you're building for photography has to be specific to one exact niche, right? So, if you want to shoot boudoir and weddings, you have to have 2 separate companies with independent social media, and that becomes exhausting. And then you start reading about how much you should be posting to each one and responding to every single comment, and very easily every day you wake up with a million things to do, 1,000,001, and you're never going to get to the and one.
Right. And exactly, I mean, I suffer from anxiety, and one of those things is just feeling like I'm never going to get through the whole list of things that I have to do. I'm never going to be like, I'm never going to complete the list of things that I need to do. for example, like I was earlier today, I recorded a bunch of videos, but I had also recorded them yesterday, and I looked at them and I was just like, I'm not happy with these. The quality's off, the audio quality's off, the video quality's off. I don't like how I look. It was just like, it's just the anxiety of that. And I have to be like, give myself a higher, I hold myself to a higher level of quality. And it's just like, it has to be better than that. And like, I have to be struggling somehow to, achieve. And I have to have all of these different things like going on. Like I have to juggle 800 different things going on at the same time, social media and actually editing a job today. And, producing new content. With content production is just such a, oh my God, it's just it's a headache.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, that's me today. I was getting rid of a lot of stuff. This kind of ties back into having too many options. We're opening up this new studio, and I was looking around, and we're going to be renting this out to other people. And I'm like, man, if people come in here and they're like wanting to try Flash, they're instantly going to be afraid of it if they walk into the room and see what we have, because there's like 15 different reflector options. There's probably 20 different softbox options. I was like, I am going to dramatically pare this down. And so I started selling a bunch of it. And then immediately today, when I had that like, oh, these are going to be gone forever now, I'm like, I need to make a video on this. So I rushed to make this like 30-minute, it took me about 30 minutes, this video on it and get all that done. And then that turned into like not having enough time to even ship it. And, it just goes back to like never having enough time to do it all. So you really have to establish boundaries. And I've been close enough to a lot of people who have seen real health damage by doing too much of a hustle for too long, right? I've seen where it ends you up, where you end up if you do that. I've had a friend who, go ahead.
I mean, I've been there. I mean, I used to work the night shift. My day before I was like a full-time photographer, I had a job working at desktop publishing for banks, and I worked the overnight shift, and I was sleeping like 2 hours a night or day, 2 hours, 3 hours a day, because I was like, I got to get up and like do my thing. I got to have like, I was doing stuff during the day. It was also, I was acting at the same time. It was back in my acting and photography career going on at the same time. And I was just like, oh, I'll work nights. That gives me, my days are flexible. Like, no, you're supposed to sleep at some point. And I developed narcolepsy. Like I was literally like falling asleep, like snap of a finger. I would just be completely out. I was at a party talking to someone and I fell asleep standing up, and they leaned me up against the wall.
Wow. Yeah, that's how you know. So did you like immediately give something up?
Yeah. I mean, I immediately, that was also around the time that I decided that, I need to take a step back and figure out what I switched from working overnight to like more of a swing shift. I was working 4 to midnight. I was like, okay, I can't just like instantly change my life, back to a normal schedule. I have to like slowly bring myself back to normal. And I was like, okay, I just have to do one thing. And, I got to get out of this, I was planning to like switch full-time to photography because the other stuff is just, I burnt out. I just burned out on everything else. And I was like, this is what I want to do. And so I just like, I have to slowly do this process. Otherwise, if I did it too quickly, I was going to hurt myself, that way as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I had a friend who was, primarily did wedding work, but also said yes to like any other little job that came in. And he was really successful as a career, like for years. And out of nowhere, on the way to a wedding one day, he felt like really bad and just drove himself to the ER, went in the ER, and they were like, you need to go to the hospital. Walked into the hospital. They're like, you are having a heart attack right now. And yeah, so he had to get the wedding covered. And, I remember dealing with that and going and seeing him at the hospital and everything. And he completely uprooted his career. He's actually the reason that I have the position that I do at the university, because he uprooted his life to go up to a 9-to-5 creative position somewhere else in Michigan. And then he was the one that was shooting at the university prior to me. So I kind of filled in for him and have been shooting for them ever since. But yeah, like that's what happens when you do this for too long, right? When you just go hard all the time, it's going to catch up to you. So no, you don't have to do it.
No, you don't. And just to finish this now before we get to the next one, like that spoke to me so much because, 2 years ago, I was putting together, I was getting ready. I had a weekend, 2 weddings. I had a Friday wedding and a Saturday wedding, and it was Thursday night. And, it was like different setups for each wedding. And I had to have I was setting up a photo booth and like video, and there's all these things, like so many moving pieces for both of them. And I was trying to get everything ready and like test out all the photo booth stuff, and like things were breaking, and I was just trying to get it, and I completely had a panic attack. And I was just like, I couldn't breathe. And my wife was like, "Are you having a heart attack right now? I was like, "No, like I'm panicking. Like I'm just like, I know this is a panic attack because I just feel like the anxiety and everything that just built up." And I'm like, I will check my heart rate, but it was like, yeah, that totally felt that, like just that sort of like I booked myself like so busily, like with so many gears turning with everything that was going on. I would just like run myself ragged even at that point. And after that happened, I was just like, okay, need to take a step back. And like, I reworked my, of course this is pre-COVID, but I reworked like how I accept things, like as far as wedding work, like, I don't, do like back-to-backs the same way that I used to. Like now, if I'm going to do something that the day before, like if it's going to be 2 weddings back-to-back the same day, or 2 day every, in 2 days, like one of them has to be kind of a very low-key thing. Like it has to, like it's not a lot of moving pieces if I'm going to do one the day after the other.
Yeah, in weddings, I think it's so common in weddings, first off, because you're generally in a field where your work is heavily concentrated. So, you'll put extra hours in at one point in the year, and then you have all that free time when nobody's booking weddings at another point in the year, especially if you're like Midwest, East Coast, where you actually have a winter. Like that happens. That's everybody. I mean, in Michigan, we know that like November through April, it's just like that's your part-time off, and then the other time you work twice as much as full-time. It's not healthy. That was a huge reason that I wanted to get out of the wedding industry, is that disproportionate work schedule. Half of it just how unbalanced it was. The other half was how much it would just destroy your summer to the point where you can't even enjoy the nice weather.
Yeah, and that's like my wife used to say, like, I when May comes around, I say goodbye to my husband until October, and it was just like I was just gone all the time, and it's like I think about that, like not being able to like do things with people during the summer, and yeah, it's a stressful situation. We should not glamorize.
Yeah.
We should not I think the point is we're getting to is like we not to glamorize that struggle, and that we work ourselves to death to literally in some cases just to pursue this.
Yeah, and I've definitely been there. Like I've been that guy who did 4 weddings in a weekend, or Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, something like that. And then you're like, posting about it on social media. Like, I don't know if that's just like a testosterone field thing where you're just like, I'm a warrior. But yeah, it's actually, it's not great. We probably shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And we definitely shouldn't be presenting it as normal to others.
No. And that's like, I have a second shooter, and a friend, he's a good friend at this point, and we've been working together for 10 years, and he says to me, I'm doing a triple this weekend, and I'm just like, what? He's like, yeah, I'm shooting my own wedding, like for me on Sunday, and I'm second shooting here on Friday, and I'm second shooting with you on Saturday, and it's just like, dude, like you need to relax. Like you're young. Like he's not even 30. Well, I think he's maybe just over 30 at this point. But it's like, you can't do that forever. You can't do that forever. Like that's something I've learned the hard way. Like you can't. It gets old. It gets old after a while.
I think it's also worse in that context where it's not all within the processes of your own business, right? Where you're jumping around from like independent contracting to second shooting to, I got this one for my own gig. And then I've got a corporate gig on Monday, which I do 3 times a year. Like when you expose yourself to that much mental stress because you have to shift out of a routine so much, you're only causing yourself more anguish.
Absolutely. All right. I think we've
beaten that to death.
Yeah, we've beaten that one pretty hard. All right, next photography myth: film is better than digital.
That okay, so I'm actually like interested in this one because you've been doing this for 20 years. So full disclosure, I got into photography like right when digital was about good enough for everybody, right? So we get into like full frame DSLRs. Professional DSLRs like the Nikon D3 was coming out. That is like when I entered the industry. So for me, I'm like a complete digital baby. I would totally be able to expose a roll of film, right? But I cannot imagine ever wanting to work with film.
Oh, it's such a hassle. Like I still do it occasionally if for myself. Like honestly, it's mostly like just on a personal level. If clients and I only offer it for weddings for clients, like nothing else. And if somebody really, really wants it, and they have to pay for the privilege at that point because it is such a pain. I grew up like, shooting film and you never know what you're going to get. Like it's honestly, it's probably why, one of the reasons I developed anxiety. Because you don't know what's going to happen. Because I would occasionally shoot like weddings like that, and like you're always thinking like, okay, but what was everybody's eyes open at the wedding? Did I or whatever? Even I was shooting headshots or musicians. That was the thing that like taught me like lighting was photographing live music shows with film because you couldn't use a flash or anything. Like you're just like constantly like, and you can't change the film speed. Like I would have 2 different camera bodies with different, ISO, film in them. And I'm shooting independently with those, like trying to remember, okay, this one's got, 400, this one's got 800, whatever. And like, adjusting, my aperture and my shutter speed, independently, like as the lights changed in a, live music show, which, it's like second to second, like how it changes. And then like thinking like, okay, did I roll this film correctly? And, did I accidentally expose any of these? Or is there a light leak in my camera that's going to like, that's what I had happen at one point was there was a little leak in my camera body, that was like exposing these streaks across like in one shoot that I did. And luckily it was kind of like it was for a musician, like a band shoot. And like, I was like, something's off here. Like something's off with my exposures. Like there's like these light leaks that are coming through, and they loved it. They were like, "Oh, this is awesome!" And I'm like, "Nope, there's a problem with my camera, but I'm not going to tell them that." They enjoyed it, but like it is such a like it's film. The quality of what you're getting out of it, like I don't think that we've surpassed that. There's like people used to the quality of a film is better. Like. Whatever, you're gonna have to scan it in most of the time anyway when print it out. Like unless you're like developing it yourself, like there's like whatever. Like I don't know. I just throw my hands up at that. But when it comes to the flexibility and the knowledge of what you're capturing, and like especially in things like whatever it is, like even editorial, portraiture, wedding work, whatever it is. That instantaneous feedback that you get from digital allows you to know that you got the shot that you wanted, allows you to like, move forward and maybe try things that are a little bit more, edgy or whatever, like take risks or light things differently or whatever, like just to see that you got it as opposed to just being like hoping and praying and crossing your fingers that you got the exposure that you wanted. just gives me a lot of respect for the people who, did all that stuff, like shooting film for a long time.
I completely wish I was in the film era, because I would have, like, from my mind, I would have like cleaned house in that era. You know what I mean? Like, it just works. Like, the mathematical side of things, like, that's where I'm strong at photography, and that's where most people are weak today. I would say 90% of your photographers out here probably can't accurately define what a stop of light is, right? And that was critical knowledge. That was critical knowledge to taking a photo, 25 years ago. Yeah. So I really wish I was in that era, but at the same time, I don't want any of the problems that you just described. And I cannot imagine any advantage in using film these days, right? And every time I see film and they're like, oh, the look, I'm like, like, I feel like that could have been replicated via digital. Like, I don't see anything about colors. I do agree that like certain film stocks are beautiful. Like, the colors that come out of them are absolutely stunning, but nothing about it seems unobtainable through digital. And then when you're talking about every process ending up digital, I love that these arguments take place on the internet, where somebody has to show a digitized version of a film image that had to be scanned at some point, right? Like, you had to turn your film into digital just so that you could make this argument.
Exactly.
It's very ironic.
It's like, and it's just like, and that is double-edged as well. Like, I see a lot of people like, get that film look, get the film look presets. And it's just like, how does this look like film? You didn't like, it goes both ways, like, I see all these people like, oh, this is how you get the film look. And I'm like, do you even know what film looks like? Because it's not necessarily that. It's not, it's not my cyan and yellow crowd that likes to just like, boost those colors. It's, yeah. I mean, I think I did well at that point in my career as a photographer shooting film, because I was great at the math, and I knew that I could get a great exposure. The problem was, for me, was the anxiety of, making sure that you got the shot, and like, that it was in focus. It was, like the people's eyes were open, that those types of things that just kind of drove me crazy.
Yeah. I mean, in today's day and age, I think it's quite clear that, you need a digital process to compete, and if you don't think you do, you're going to be working really hard to establish that niche just to make that work. And, if you're willing to take that journey, cool. I just don't see what the advantages are these days.
Yeah. I don't think there are that many, other than for the niche of like clients who really want that, who want that sort of, I don't know, visceral feel or whatever it is. Because I certainly have had some wedding clients who booked me because I offered film, and also I've lost some wedding clients because I didn't offer the kind of film that they wanted. They wanted like wet plate, exposures.
What?
Full, like, 10 by 10, like.
I need daguerreotype.
Yeah. Like, I'm not kidding. I had like 2 of these over the last probably 8 years. Where people were just like, this is what we want, and we saw this at somebody else's wedding, and I'm like, then hire that person, because man, I don't have that equipment. I don't.
Do you think there's a niche? Do you think there's a very high paying niche market for photos captured with a camera obscura?
Yeah.
Like, all right, it's gonna be a 4-hour exposure. Enjoy.
You all stand real still.
That'd be great for like a backyard wedding. You like only give them, all you have to deliver is one 4-hour exposure of the whole day. Right? And it completely captures everything, your whole day. I didn't miss a second. You can't see any part of it, but I didn't miss a second. I'm going to start offering that. That's me jumping back into the wedding industry.
Well, it's a really, you just have to know the settings to use, and you've got your pinhole camera, and you're just like, setting everything up, and you just like leave, and you can go do like 8 jobs, because as long as you have the equipment, you can just set everything. We've broken ground on a whole new market for weddings.
Yeah. Somebody's going to take this and run.
Somebody listening to this is going to like take that off. All right. Which this leads me to the next question or next trope, which is actually where I contacted you about to do this episode. Getting published or winning awards means that you're successful.
I mean, if people go and see my Instagram, they're going to see how I feel about this. I have to read it. I don't remember what I put. Let me bring this up real quick. I apologize.
I think I've got it right here.
I got it. All right. It's my bio on Instagram right now is award-winning and internationally published photographer, also specializes in finding paid awards and international self-publishing. That about sums out I feel about it. Now, I don't want to completely cheapen all awards. One photographer, if I have a photography crush, especially in the wedding niche, it is Jason Vincent. Do you know who that is? Oh man, check him out. He just won he was top 25 in the Fearless Photographer Awards in the world, and I believe he was number 2 in the United States. And I look at like the stuff he makes and I'm like, totally deserves it. Totally deserves award recognition, right? And of all the award companies, I actually do think Fearless would be one of the few that I actually respect. Now, I will say, sometimes I wonder with Fearless, and I wonder this of a lot of industries, is how big is the disconnect between what clients like and what photographers / photography judges like.
Ooh, this is a whole other episode. And maybe we should come back to this because I just did a recorded episode about like emotionally connecting to a photo as a viewer or as like a client versus what photographers tend to like think about as being like a great photo. Like, you know, and I go both ways with this and like thinking like, you know, there are times when I go like, yeah, I mean, there's some times where I appreciate the validation of winning an award. And there are other times where I'm like, but what did my clients think about it? So like, yeah, I do, you know, like getting those like reviews and things from clients where say like, I loved this picture. I loved my photos. I loved what I got back because it means so much to me emotionally. And that is something that other photographers are not, they're going to be looking at this photo like, I'm looking at the composition. I'm looking at the lighting. I'm looking at, you know, everything, you know, the exposure, whatever. And I'm not necessarily thinking about how it serves the client.
Yeah, I think the biggest barometer for that is what makes it in the wedding album. Because what's funny is like what I share for a client's wedding, I guess what I did share, I haven't done this in so long now. What I used to share from a client's wedding was almost always not represented in the same way in the album. Right. And the album is where I'll have like 6 pages of the family photos and you won't see a single one of those on my blog. Right. So it's very interesting. And it's funny too, in that it does attract the clients. Those wow shots do tend to attract the clients, but it's not the bread and butter when you actually get to, fulfilling their order or like them getting what they want. They get that in a completely different place from what led them to you, which is so bizarre. Yeah. But the thing is like, you know, like to go like back onto like the topic of getting published or, you know, in awards, it's like, there's just so much out there. Like people look at and think, you know, like, oh, they won an award. Oh, they got published here. Like they must be great. Like, but there's that disconnect. Like it's good for photographers to have that sort of like credibility. But also it's important for, I guess, clients, no matter what industry you're in, not just weddings, to kind of like look at that and go like, okay, well, has everyone won that award? Yeah. Yeah. Well, that's the problem with awards right now is like I could go sign up for 10 programs right now and have a whole list of awards, within the next 6 months. No problem.
Well, it's like I was telling some people the other day, like they were talking about awards and I was like, I won an award that I was pretty proud of at the time because it was actually based on like voting from a bunch of like different wedding industry professionals and like it was like thousands of people voted, but they were all people in the wedding industry. And then like I won it, and I was like for my category, like I won, and I was like, oh, this is great, this is awesome. And then the next year they were like, hey, this is how we can make money. We're going to charge you $50 to enter, and then you can just open it up to your social media following to vote. And I was like,
oh.
So now it's just going to be a popularity contest.
Right. Which is a huge problem. Like that is such a problem. This could be a whole episode too, is like existing audience drive and how that can move stuff to the top that doesn't necessarily deserve to be there. Right. That is like a huge issue across every facet of the internet right now.
Yeah. Just like any sort of content creation. And it's just, and that also, as far as like getting published and like people like looking to, it's when you posted that on your Instagram profile about like, internationally published, it just, my immediate thought and the reason I commented was because I just remembered my wife works in media relations and PR and things that, like we talk about like, pay to play all the time and like, what's happening in the industry. And like, actually just a friend of mine who works in marketing was talking about how you can pay $1,500 and be a quote unquote contributor to Forbes magazine. Website, whatever. But I was remembering like getting these emails, and I would get them like, I remember like 3 or 4 times a year, usually quarterly. Now that I think about it, from magazines in Europe who would say, if you want an article in a wedding magazine, in Europe, published about you, pay us $1,200, and we're going to do a whole full page or 2-page article on you. And I was like, well, if you're paying for it,
how prominent is it? Yeah, it's way more prominent when you get paid to be in the article or to write the article. That's prominent, and nobody can see the difference, right?
Or just featured in general, like just like that's like if somebody's like choosing to publish your work and saying like, oh, look at this, as opposed to they can't tell the difference between whether you paid for it or whether someone independently chose to feature your work.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's why I put a ton of stock into like the stuff that I get published through the university. And then I do really enjoy whenever like somebody reaches out for an article. I've had a few of those this year. I was just published in print from Digital Photographer magazine for the first time, as well as Behind the Shutter magazine. And like, to me, like I am proud of those things, but it sort of gets lost, and I won't wear it too much as a badge of honor because I know from an external perspective, at least to photographers, like they can't really tell the difference between that and, some magazine that somebody shares that they were featured in.
Yeah. Being able to pay to get yourself featured, it just kind of, it almost ruins the credibility factor for a lot of people.
Yeah, absolutely. And so I think we need to look at how we define successful or famous. I'm like anti-fame. I think it's just so silly. But in terms of success, like there's a complete different success when it's like external to photographers versus successful to serving your clients, right? You can be a silent killer in your local community and no one 10 miles from you has ever heard of you. Those exist in every single community because they are successful at serving their clients. And then there's probably people out there who are all over the internet and we probably idolize them, who probably have some bad reviews or some negative client, communication coming back from clients, some dissatisfied clients.
The story. There was a very famous wedding photographer who did a series of shoots and became very famous in the wedding industry very quickly. And I remembered seeing him featured. I'm not going to mention the name. Seeing him featured in Rangefinder, I think it was, or something, talking about how his business had exploded And he had gone from shooting 10 weddings a year. He was booked for 10 weddings a year, and now he's suddenly booked for 80 weddings a year. And I immediately thought,
oh my gosh,
oh God, like this person is not going to be able to keep up with this. And he was talking about like, yeah, I'm traveling all the time, and I'm going, shooting 3-4 weddings a weekend sometimes. And I was doing a sit down lunch with like wedding photographers in New York City, and we were like talking whatever, and we were talking about horror stories of like things we had heard. And this girl piped up and she said, I have one, and it's from my wedding. And she had hired this guy. And she didn't hear back from him for a long time, and he didn't send her any photos. And she was like reaching out to him, and she's like, oh, he's probably busy, blah, 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 whatever. She'd gotten married on a Thursday. He had told her that he was flying from where she got married in Nevada. He was flying to Minneapolis on Friday for a wedding, and then he was flying to somewhere down south on Saturday, and then he had another wedding on Sunday. Then he was going back to where he lived on Monday. But she's not hearing anything from him, and she starts doing some digging, and she starts finding a lot of negative reviews saying that this guy would like cancel weddings on people because he basically got a gig somewhere that he would prefer to do, and he would say that someone in his family had died, cancel the wedding, and then book the gig for somewhere else. And then he would just like, he was booking all these jobs, and there was just a lot of weird stuff going on. And then like she and her, maid of honor, like kept like pressing him on social media, leaving comments on his Facebook page, like, hey, we're looking forward to seeing the photos from X, wedding soon. And he
6 months ago.
Yeah, exactly. At this point, it's been 6 months. And he like calls out the maid of honor on his Facebook page and says like, hey, listen, the photos will be ready when they're ready.
Wow.
So like they're starting to get a little worried at this point because she's a wedding photographer. She knows how this works. And she's like, she hasn't seen any like preview images or anything at this point. And then he posts a blog from the same place, from the same venue where they got married. And she sees that she knows some of those photos are from her wedding.
What?
And she's like, wait a second. This isn't like he's portraying this as, somebody else's wedding, but I know that's the back of my father-in-law's head. I know that is from my wedding. And this is a very, very specific venue. And the bride from that wedding says, comments on the post and says, thank you so much for showing me the photos from that other wedding that you shot there. That's why we booked you for this. And it's literally been 2 weeks since this wedding, and he's already publishing it. And she's like, what the hell is going on? So she reaches out to him and says what's happening here? And he's like, all right, I didn't know how to tell you this, but I lost most of the photos from your wedding. Sorry.
Oh my God.
Because he didn't know how to he was, I guess, using the same memory cards or whatever. He traveled to these 3 other weddings after hers and does not erase them or whatever. He's like, yeah, I got some photos from the ceremony, and I got some of the getting ready pictures, and I got a few from the reception, but that's it.
How do you even only have that? I'm trying to think of the card situation where you only have parts from every part of the day.
He's shooting with 2 cameras. I'm guessing it was his second camera, and he didn't overwrite that card, is my guess.
Yeah.
That's my guess from listening to what she said. That was, I guess I'm man. But yeah, this guy became super famous because of, or super famous in the wedding, photography world, because all of these, publications kind of went crazy for him, and some of these photos that he put out there. And I was yeah, as soon as I saw I am now shooting 70 to 80 weddings a year, when last year I was shooting 10. I'm like, ooh, scalability, buddy, scalability.
Yeah.
And all right.
Oh man. Post show, you got to tell me who that is.
I will. All right. Well, afterwards. All right. Moving on. I think we kind of addressed this a little bit earlier. If you enjoy it, you have to make money doing it.
I think we can go over this one quick. It's definitely not true. This can be a hobby. You can keep it a hobby and it'll be super fun and you can probably enjoy it for the rest of your life. If you make it your job, especially if you desire to make it your full-time job, you will likely love it less.
Because it becomes a job.
Yeah. And so you get exposed to everything else that it entails, and it's running a business, which I got news for you. Like, photography will instantly become like less than 50%. And that's including editing.
Yeah, and it's just like that's the part that, like, my wife always says, like, well, what parts don't you like? And I'm like, the running the business part, the marketing, and that stuff is the it's not the doing the taxes and marketing and all that sort of stuff. It makes it less fun. Like, just putting it out there, it makes it less fun.
I made I believe it was a TikTok video where I made this fake keyboard shortcut for Lightroom that you activated by smacking your face on the keyboard, and it woke you up. It woke you up to realize that you spend 80% of your time on marketing duties and emails and all of those aspects when you started this career because you wanted to be outside taking photos. That's the reality for a lot of people.
Yeah, you don't have to. If you enjoy doing this, you don't have to do it as a business. All right, next one. All right, I don't know. How do you pronounce this? Because it's bokeh?
Bokeh. I don't care. Bokeh is what naturally comes out of my mouth. But I also say ISO.
Equals great portraiture.
This is... So we had I have a podcast with my buddy Justin called the High ISO Podcast, and we did an episode, and he summed this up in a way that I had never thought about, in that the reason that bokeh is so popular is because it's the visual representation of why we spend so much money on our lenses, right? That's why, if you're going to buy a 1.4 35 millimeter prime, you're probably spending close to $1,000, maybe $1,500 if you're on Sony or these new Canon mirrorless systems, right? It's a big expense, and the way you show it is with that wide aperture. There's also, just over the last few years, over the last decade, really, the way lighting has evolved. And now you can use wide apertures outdoors very accurately, and the autofocus is good at wide apertures. There's a lot of reasons why a decade ago or a little bit longer that you wouldn't be shooting at 1.2 or 1.4 outdoors that are completely obtainable now. Those problems have been solved, so it's just doable. First off,
well, I mean, you can neutral density filters and various other things, other ways you can around it. Yeah, people are shooting at these super wide apertures. Also, those f2 200 millimeter lenses is just it's just it's so the background is almost non-existent. When you're looking at it, it's just okay, they're great, but you're are your clients sitting there going yeah, this is the photo that I want? Or are they looking at that and going well, this must means he's really good?
I can't see anything.
It's like they lifted this person off of the page,
I think there's a dozen reasons why it's so popular. I mean, A, it was a big separator from your camera phones or your cheap cameras. B, just because, again, that representation of the money. C, it makes being in a shitty location really easy. I mean, this is where you see how many photos have you seen that are just down the street with all these cars in the background, and because it's at 1.2, you can't really see any of it detailed or the subject. Your eye still goes right to the subject so that you ignore it. It's just so easy.
I was just talking. I just remember Ryan Brenizer. I don't know if you're familiar with him. Brenizer method.
Yes.
Guy talking about ways around crappy backgrounds. Yes, make it totally blurry. Blow it out with light. Just blow it up with your lighting, just so that you can't see the crappy background. And yeah, it's totally something that people do. It's with their, and he mentioned it as one of the things with the Brenizer method, just to make that background so blurry that you didn't even almost recognize it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of a cheat code. Now, does it equal great portraits? No, I don't think so. In fact, I think a portrait is better when the context of the background ties in accurately to the purpose of the photo, which almost always requires more than wide open.
Right. And I think that, again, we were talking about, like as we mentioned at the very beginning, and most of this stuff is going to be, it depends. It depends on what you're trying to do. And a lot of the time, you can't get all of your subject in focus unless they're far away from the camera. Like any sort of like headshot. Like I've seen people like going, whoa, I'm having trouble getting my headshots in focus. Do I need a different camera? And I'm like, what's the problem? And they're like, oh, it's just like, part of the face is out of focus, but this isn't. And I'm like looking, I'm like, you're shooting at 1.2. Like, maybe that's the problem. Maybe you need to stop it down a little bit and get a little bit wider, like a bit more depth of field in there so that you can get the whole face in focus. Maybe that's what the problem is. You can't shoot a headshot, at 1.2 and expect the whole face to be in focus and clear.
I don't know how you experience this, but I think part of the reason too is with Instagram being such a big vehicle for sharing photography, that the smaller the screen size, the less that matters. Right. You can't tell at all. And like, if you're an like a LCD shooter, or, you get much enlarged vision when you're looking through the viewfinder. But yeah, if you're like reviewing off of an LCD too, you may find when you get home, you're like, oh, this is actually not as in focus as I wanted. Yeah. So I've kind of trained myself that when it looks good on the EVF, go up another stop.
Yeah. One more stop isn't going to hurt you.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. And moving on to the next one, the must and always rules. Like, you always have to do the rule of thirds. You can't break the rule of thirds. This is actually a joke in the podcast. So yeah, these sorts of things, kind of drive me crazy.
First off, if there's asymmetry, I'm breaking the rule of thirds every time, and I'm focusing on asymmetry instead. That just works better for my brain. But every single rule, I think everybody's heard this. It's a trope in itself that you break the rules in art, right? So sometimes, yeah, the rule of thirds is great. They're nice foundational things that you can use to elevate the average of your photography, but by no means should you feel trapped by them. They can become the same thing that too much gear becomes, in that you start only living within their confines.
Yeah, you start to get limited by the rules themselves, which is why you break them. But it's like, it's good to, like you said, it's good to know the foundational aspects of things. Like, yes, this is why the rule of thirds, why it works. It's because of the way your eye moves or whatever. It's like, but that leads you to 80 different other rules of composition. So it's just like, you knowing all of those things and how people's brains work can help you. Yes. Like you're saying, asymmetry. That is another thing that like causes you to pay attention. Like knowing all of these different things can help you produce a better image, but it doesn't mean you have to fulfill all of them all the same time, all in every photo.
I'm in like an internal struggle with like how I like consuming video versus what is more important these days. When it comes to watching something, man, give me like 65 millimeter wide or 21:9. Like those are the aspect ratios I love. So to then have to prioritize vertical content all week, it just claws at my core. But I have to. Like, I can't do anything about it.
Well,
right?
Having to produce vertical content is just like it hurts. It hurts.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's another thing, too, is your rules are going to change eventually, right? And you got to be prepared for that.
Depending on the mode of delivery, yeah, it's going to completely change. But this sort of leads into the next question. Always use a UV filter.
Are you team UV filter or no?
I am team UV filter for a particular reason. And go ahead. It's fine. I'll get into my...
Somebody's busted a lens before. So I am not team UV filter. There was a period where I wasn't even team lens cap. I used to leave all of my front lens caps off for that super amount of time I saved not having to take lens caps off at wedding. Seriously, I was just sick of losing them because like I'm the type who will like put my lens on really quick, walk away and like flick my lens cap back towards my bag, like try to shoot it into the lens compartment. And if it just rolls out and rolls away, I'm like, psh, screw it. That's me. The person who helps me most in my photography career, He always refers to me as like the Yeet King because I throw gear all the time. Like anything that is not really fragile, I throw all the time. It's just fun for me. But anyways, I ended up going back to lens caps after having suffered quite a few scratches and having to get them repaired. But I'm still not team UV filter. And I don't really have a good reason other than I don't want the extra piece of glass. I don't find that it's really that durable. And if I got one that was good enough that I wasn't worried about how it would affect my image quality, then I feel like I'm paying as much as I'd pay to repair a front element anyway. That's kind of my justification.
All right. So coming in from the opposite side, my issue is that I have not broken a lens, but it's because I had a UV filter on there and it wasn't me dropping it or doing anything untoward towards my lens elements. It was somebody walking by with a pole in his hand and he just turned and hit my camera. And I was like, hey man, be careful. And I pulled my camera up and looked, I'm like, it was my 70 to 200. And I looked at it and it was just, all I saw was busted glass. And I was freaking, I was on the shoot and I was just like, oh God. And then I looked at it, I was like, oh, it's just the UV filter. I will also say when it comes to UV filters, never go cheap. Any filter, whatever it is, whether it's a UV filter, polarizing filter, neutral density filter, your pictures are only going to be as good as the quality of the glass that you're putting in front of it, no matter what the filter is.
Completely agree with you there. And that's why I'm like, so I don't know, maybe it's different for different brands, but I have now had 2 front elements replaced by Sony Professional Services, and it was $100 each time. And we're talking G Master glass too, so it's not like they're placing the glass on a 51.8 or anything.
Yeah, I mean that's Canon. I'm a Canon guy, so it was like, I think that it was like when I estimated something because I had a scratch on something, I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna get a new lens. It was an old lens to begin with. I think I'll upgrade at this point. But yeah, I mean, my thing is with the UV filter is you don't put a cheap piece of plastic in front of your lens. Like that's what you're gonna get, garbage. Like, and I agree with you. There are times when I will remove filters, but like weddings and stuff, that's not when I'm removing a filter. Just because too many people bump into me and knock stuff into my camera, my gear, that I'm just like, I don't want this happening at a wedding.
So I don't know how I haven't broken a lens at a wedding, because I'm like the hold fast guy. So like I have 2 cameras swinging at my sides all day, right? And so like the hold fast dance when you're like trying to navigate between tables and you're going to be rotating your shoulders a lot, so you have to hold both of your cameras. That's the hold fast dance. But specifically, I'm shocked that I haven't lost one at a Jewish Orthodox wedding. Have you ever
Yes.
photographed a Jewish Orthodox wedding? Oh man, those guys go hard on the dance floor.
It's crazy. I mean, like I will send you some pictures from the last one that I shot. It was nuts. But yeah, I totally get what you mean. Like people are just like, there's so many people. The hold fast dance, like walking through crowds, like, oh, I got to squeeze between these 2 chairs, or I've got to sit down at some point. Yeah, I totally get what you mean. But yeah, that's, I mean, like I'm team UV filter. I totally understand not being team UV filter. It's just it's one of those things. It's a matter of personal. You take your risks where you're going to take them.
Yeah. It just depends, right? Back to the central theme that ties all of these together. It depends. I won't die on that hill. I think either one can be justified, and it's probably largely dependent on your previous experiences, which is surprising because I have had a lens completely destroyed by a puck. I don't think a UV filter would have saved it, though. This thing came flying at me. A hockey puck. I was shooting from a bench.
Or like, I'm just curious, since we're both from Michigan, who are you shooting?
Oh, so Michigan, so hockey is huge in Michigan because we've got the Detroit Red Wings, but also we've got Canada right across the border, and they come out of, the womb with a hockey stick. So there's a huge tournament, and there's tons of really good talent every year. Like, you're talking like the Little Caesars farm system of 16-year-olds who can like already, slap shot at crazy speeds. This is like who I was photographing, but you're in these pretty shoddy venues. So you're talking like benches with no glass whatsoever, but I don't want to be shooting through glass because the glass is so banged up at these venues. So I was on a bench once, all the way at the end of it, and somebody just tried to shoot it up to the boards and get it flying around, and just came. Scariest thing I've ever experienced probably is seeing the puck at 200 millimeters come flying at me. Actually 300 millimeters, because I was on a crop lens or a crop body. Yeah, 300 millimeters. Man, that thing fills the frame quick when it comes flying at you, and then just smashed, just absolutely just destroyed this lens, completely screwed up the autofocus motor.
Well, you're probably lucky that it hit the lens and not you.
Yeah, I'll take the lens damage over like hitting me in the grill. That would have been horrible.
Yeah, that would have been pretty terrible. Having seen someone get hit at a Red Wings game, like it went up over the boards, like and hit someone in the crowd.
Oh man, yeah. So it had all the velocity still.
Yeah.
Oh gosh, that's scary.
Moving on to our next myth. PPI, points per inch, dots per inch. But
I don't even understand how this is like still brought up frequently. I can't even describe any applications. And this is coming from somebody who works with their work going to print all the time. I don't think the designers have ever mentioned PPI or DPI to me.
No, they don't care. They say high resolution. Give me a high resolution.
Yeah, give me the most you got, right? I'll take that back. I did just have a designer who had to reach out and tell me that that one of my photos didn't have enough, like didn't have DPI to meet their project. They're like, it's only 59, we need 72. And I was like, what are you doing with the photo? Because I have the highest megapixel full frame camera and I didn't crop it all. Like, you have a 61 megapixel photo. There's not a DSLR on the market with more megapixels than that. What are you trying to do?
This is basically a medium format.
Yeah. And it turns out that they were just trying to print something 16 feet. So I just had to manage some expectations, I guess, and say, well, we can reshoot it. I'm just going to have to get like the Fuji 100S and do like their, what is it? Pixel shifting? Yeah, that's it. Pixel shifting. Like, that's all I can do.
Yeah, but I mean, the thing is, at that point, like, even, I don't know, like, printing something 16 feet, you're printing billboards, like, I difference to print billboards, but you print it at a different DPI, like, or whatever. Like, it's all about what you're printing. Like, I used to tell people, like, if they're planning to print, like, whatever, an 8x10, like, think of it like you need 300 DPI to print. Like, so it needs to be at least, whatever, 3,000 on the end or whatever to, like, be very good quality or whatever. I think that's even gone down. Maybe it's like 240 at this point.
Yeah.
But it's like,
I think that's Lightroom's default.
Yeah, it's 240. And it's like, so, 2,400 pixels on the long end for, like an 8x10, whatever print is pretty good quality. Like, yes. Okay. But I've had people send me like for things like I've said, like, okay, I need a high, when I was doing more like graphic design stuff, when I was working in, publication stuff, and I'd be like, okay, we need the high resolution image. And they would send me something that was at 600 DPI, but it's only 1 inch wide. So it was 600 pixels, but it was 600 DPI. And I'm like, this is the size of a postage stamp. And they're like, no, it's 600 DPI, man. That's high res. And I'm like, no, it's.
Yeah, I don't. So, I mean, I guess we should probably clarify for anybody that doesn't understand why this is so irrelevant, but like PPI should not be a discussion. It's pixels per inch or dots per inch should not be a concern to you, because especially if you're only working in web, zero concern whatsoever, right? Because 1200 pixels is 1200 pixels. The web is going to display that regardless of what the DPI is. And then when you get into print, it only would matter if the design prioritized DPI over pixels. Like if the design was going to throw out pixels, which I don't think any type of software does.
No, none. And that's totally on the designer if that happened. Like, it's just like, you need to have a discussion with whoever the designer is.
Right. Yeah. Their processes are bad. So, don't worry about if your photos are 72, 240, 300. Just deliver. If you're looking for maximum quality, just deliver the maximum pixel size that you can offer.
Exactly. And that's the thing. It's like, even if you're sending this to a print shop, most of the time they're only looking at the pixel dimensions. They're not even looking at the DPI, and they will handle it. Like, if you're sending it to pretty much anywhere, unless you're printing it yourself, or unless you're looking for some sort of like output specifically, like where you are, like you're doing a design, like, for some sort of like printed materials, like, don't worry. If you send it to somebody, they're going to like print it out at the appropriate DPI. Just send them the highest resolution version to print.
Yep. Let them do whatever they need to with that. That should just be the move.
What's up?
Well, I've got good news and I've got bad news.
Give me the bad news first.
Well, your website is incredibly slow and it's susceptible to being hacked.
I had a suspicion that was the case. What do you prescribe?
Use SiteGround as your website host. They offer fast, secure hosting for small and medium-sized websites, as well as managed WordPress hosting.
Can I pick up SiteGround at my local pharmacy?
No. You'll need to go to nerdyphotographer.com/recommends/SiteGround to find out more.
Thanks. So, what's the good news?
You have 6 months to live.
That's good news?
Better than a week.
Well, you've got me there, Doc.
Hey, and now for my favorite part of the show. What's that say? Useless information. This is always death.
Useless information for this episode.
I'm so excited for this portion.
You're excited for this portion? I'm glad someone's excited for
Yeah,
it.
this is what I'm most excited for, because I don't know what it's going to be like.
The Atacama Desert in Chile is a 600-mile stretch of desert, and it is so dry that if you die there, your corpse will barely decay. And
You just like instantly,
and in some parts of it, no one has ever, in human history, no one has recorded rainfall. There are some areas of it where no rainfall has ever been recorded. There's no moisture.
This sounds like some of the weddings I've shot in August.
August? Ooh, those are the most humid ones, man. Ooh.
I know.
Oh, well. Yeah, I guess I didn't really think about humidity. I was just thinking about the fact that they're like 120 degrees. Yeah, driest place ever. What is the driest place I've ever been? Vegas is pretty dry.
This is pretty dry.
It's still not that bad. I think
I've driven through Death Valley. It's pretty dry.
I went to a desert in Peru. I went sandboarding there and fell on my face. Okay, so would your body just be instantly mummified?
I'm pretty sure that's what they're saying. It's like, it's so dry that when you die, like probably within like an hour or so, there's just like you just become like desiccated, and like there's no, like you just become a mummy.
Yeah, you can't like mold or, oh my God, that's kind of gross. Like, I want to instantly know where the nearest community to this place is.
There are actually, like, on the outskirts, there are millions of people living in this like area. It's not like completely devoid of people. Like, there are people who live, on the outskirts of this desert, like, in the area. It's not, uninhabited.
They're nuts. How do you not move? Is it just like not an option? I'm assuming it must not be an option.
That I had with my nephew at one point, and he was like, he really didn't understand. Like, we were discussing, like, there are people who, in areas of the world, like, they couldn't grow food and whatever. And he was like, why don't they just move? And I'm like, because they can't.
Why don't they just hop in their Tesla or like hop on Virgin Airlines and just go to the next place over where all the burgers are? Yeah, it's a very like first world perspective. And like, even I get in there sometimes, like, not remembering or not realizing the quality of life that some people are still forced to live in. It's kind of scary.
They don't have options.
And then meanwhile, we're over here bitching about whether or not we should put a $200 UV filter in front of our lens.
Like, definitely first world problems.
Yep. Oh, I'm going to go look this place up now.
Welcome back. I would like to thank my guest, Rob Hall, for being on the podcast. You can find Rob on Instagram at Rob Hall Photo and as the co-host of the High ISO, or as he likes to call it, High ISO podcast. Rob will return in the second part of our photography myths and tropes discussion. Be sure to subscribe and catch that episode when it comes out in a couple of weeks. And you can find us on Facebook at Nerdy Photographer and on Instagram and Twitter at The Nerdy Photo. We've also got a subreddit, The Nerdy Photo, and our own club on Clubhouse, so you can go find us there.
I'm having some processing issues. Did you say the words properly?
Yeah, I said the words.
What words did you say?
Okay, maybe I didn't say every single last syllable, but I said the words, basically.
Say them again.
Fine. I'll say the words. Until next time, everybody, stay safe and stay nerdy. Vatu Varata.
Who's that coming back to town? You better start listening. Who's your heart been beating about? You better listen.